you can, I mean, there's no question about it. You can rap. And you have held your own over the years, side by side, on tracks, features, all that with some of the best artists in the game. So there's no question about that. But, you're still down in the South, and somehow, some way you got on the radar of Interscope Records
Yeah.
and Jimmy Iovine. It's a lot of dudes in major cities, and they got the gift. They could really rap, and it feels like no matter what they do, they can't get the attention of a major record label executive.
Because I put out my first independent CD. My first major label release on Interscope was called Dark Days, Bright Nights, but the independent version of that album came out 2 years prior that we released, locally. And it did well locally or whatever. All right, so and if you think about it, I was about 1.5 to 2 years behind Eminem's process, basically meaning his first album came out on Interscope in like 98, 99. I signed to Interscope in 2000, and then my first album on Interscope came out in 2001. All right, but if you think about it, prior to Eminem coming out, there had been a lull because I guess, with Vanilla Ice was kind of the last prominent, like, worldwide thing that went down with, as far as a white boy doing some rap shit in the early 90s. But then, there was some discrepancies, I guess, in his story, you know what I'm saying? And it was kind of, I like Vanilla Ice personally. I think he was jamming. He sold 15 million albums, man. Somebody bought them damn albums, you know what I'm saying?
That's right.
Somebody was jamming that shit, and I was one of them. I think a lot of people that might have talked shit eventually about him was jamming him when it was new, you know what I'm saying? When he had the hair and he was dancing. Well, man, Vanilla Ice was rock. But then there was just a lull. There was a long period of time where there just wasn't as much love for the institution, for the prospect of there being a white rapper. And then, so basically, I think there were a lot of white rappers that went back into the bunker and basically learning from the mistakes of Vanilla Ice or that situation were like, if you're going to be a white, because what I decided was, that just shows me what I already knew. If you're going to be a white boy and you're going to do this shit, you got to tell your story. You got to keep this shit real, because that's the spirit of hip hop. You know what I mean? And so I was on track already to get there. I do believe that. But then Eminem came, and I remember the day Eminem came out, I saw the Hide My Name Is video on MTV. I went into depression mode, because you kind of had this mindset at that time, like, there's only gonna be one, you know what I'm saying? Like, and so, and then I was like, he got it. He did it perfect. The hell with it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then my best friend, Big Steve, he was like, he came, he snatched me up. He was like, man, he's hard now. I ain't gonna take it away from him, but you Southern country, you got a different thing going to him. You still got a spot in this thing. And I was like, all right, tell me more, let's go. And then, as fate would have it, 2 years later, I was signed to Interscope Records too. The same label that Eminem had been signed on. And even when I met Eminem, he paid me the greatest compliment I feel like that he could have ever paid me. And it took me a while to understand what he meant when he said this, but when I met him, he said, I want you to know I have nothing but good things to say about you. And I said, mutual, man, mutual. And he said, look, I don't know if you would have ever made it had there never been a me, but you deserve to make it whether there was ever a me or not. You know what I'm saying? And for him to say that, once I really understood, got some time, like a day or two later, it really dawned on me what he was saying. And that, to me, that was a tremendous compliment, and there's been a lot of, it's been the onslaught of white rappers ever since then, you know what I'm saying? But as far as the modern era, like, from 2000 on, it was Eminem, then it was me. And there's really not much you can say to dispute that. And that's not to say that there's been a lot of talented white cats come into hip hop, and talented white rappers and singers, all kind of stuff, but songwriters. But at that time, you know what I'm saying, it was a different world. You know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
it was
very much so.
It was a lot more difficult to access fans. You know what I'm saying? Like, now you just go make a social media post, you can directly access your fans. But back then, you had to either go through MTV, BET, the TV, video world, radio, FM radio, live shows, or the actual CD, and, cassette tape. That was it. That was the only way you could access fans. And so it's a lot different now. But and also a difference back from then as compared to now is it didn't matter where you were from back in those days. It didn't matter where you were from. If you was gonna do this, there was a certain walk you had to take. You know what I'm saying? And that was in the streets. You know what I'm saying? As far as like if you wanted to gain acceptance, doing hip hop, it did not matter where you came from. That's where you had to go to get it. And I think a certain amount of respect, even if you didn't have it prior to going through that process, I think that a certain respect was acquired along the way that maybe some cats don't have these days. You know what I'm saying? Because you can really just start recording and blow up, you know what I'm saying, sitting on your couch in the suburbs and never have, what they say, put your feet on the grass. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you never have really had to take that walk, and maybe some cats, maybe there's not as much appreciation or respect for the predecessors that we all have within this hip hop thing, and just for the spirit of what hip hop really is all about. You know what I'm saying? And I hate that. I always say I would never sound like the old dude because I'm not. I love listening to younger cats' music, but I'm just talking about there is a gap as far as like, I always had tremendous respect for my predecessors in this thing. You know what I'm saying? When I had a chance to meet the E40s, you know what I'm saying? The Too Shorts, the Outkast, the Goody Mobs, you know what I'm saying? Ended up being a part of the Dungeon family, you know what I'm saying? That was a tremendous honor because that collective shaped me so much. But it was always a thing with me, like, pay the utmost respect to those that came before you. You know what I'm saying? Because they truly paved the way for you to be there. And I think there's a little bit of that lacking these days. Not saying, in all cases, but I definitely see examples of that for sure.
Nah, absolutely. It's a lot easier to get your music out there, in 2023. It's easier than it's ever been. Back in them days, studio time alone would cost you an arm and a leg. Now you can pretty much go in your bedroom, record a record, and put it out within 3 hours.
Back in those days, you had pretty much made it. Like to get to a real studio and record, like you pretty much it was like somehow you had to figure out a way to make it without ever having been in a, you know what I'm saying? Like without having ever been in a big like studio like that. Because I remember going to like Sony in New York after I signed to Interscope and just being like, or even like Patchworks here in Atlanta back in the day and just being like, man, this is such a different experience, man. Like being in this nice ass studio with a big, beautiful board and they bring it in like a runner's coming in asking you what you want to eat and all that stuff, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But nowadays, some cats may end up starting on their own couch in the suburbs or in the country or wherever they at and end up going platinum and never experience that because they record themselves sitting in their own living room or in their basement or whatever, you know what I'm saying? So it's just, things change.